please welcome to the stage Chief Product and Information Officer at Traxco, Matt Griffin, co-founder and CEO at Sabriri AI, Jean Belanger, and your session moderator, Director of Corporate Travel at Cvent, Tim Jones.
Ominous.
I sit over here?
No, you're that one.
Okay. Yeah.
There we go. Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the first session for the Cvent Travel Summit, which is decoding the hidden power of data for business travel and meetings. I am Tim Jones. As you heard, I'm Director of Travel at Cvent, and I'm going to be the moderator for today's session. So let's introduce our panel. First, we have Matt, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hello, everyone. Hope you had a good lunch. So I'm Matt Griffin. I'm the Chief Product Officer and Information Officer at Traxco, based just up the road up in Dallas. So Traxco is a software company that offers services directly to corporations to help them look out for the safety of their travelers and ensure that they're spending the company's money and resources wisely. We focus on providing them with a comprehensive view of all their travel bookings, help them and provide tools to help them make the best decisions based on top of that, and then ensure that that data goes to other service providers that they work with that enhance their ability to deliver those services for travelers.
Thank you. Introduce our next panelist, Jean.
I'm Jean Belanger. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Cvent AI. We're an analytics company that reconciles travel data. As everyone knows, in travel, data is a bit of a problem. And so we reconcile the expense, the credit card, the TMC data, and increasingly a diverse set of other data sources, Uber for business, et cetera. And we reconcile all of that and present an analytical framework for customers to figure out where they're spending their money and why.
So everyone, for today's session, we want to make it as interactive as possible. So as we're going through the topics, we want the conversation to be very lively. So if you have a question or input on what we're discussing, please feel free to raise your hand. We'll have people walking around with microphones. We'll get live answers for you. Keep it as an interactive session. I'll also be monitoring the chat in the app if you'd like to post some questions there. My colleague Tim will go through the questions and we'll get through as many of those as possible. But let's go ahead and get started. Before we talk about how data can be a solution to travel challenges and meeting challenges, we need to first understand what the problems are that we are seeing in managed travel and meetings programs. So Jean, why don't you walk us through what you see the problems are today?
Okay, are we going to put up the first slide? Yeah, so this is basically a pretty good overview of travel today. You have your corporate traveler, you have your managed travel and meetings program team, and you're either in policy or you're out of policy. And you have money flowing from various and sundry participants. You have duty of care issues that you have to worry about. You have contracts that you sign with various vendors. And when you look at this list, you begin to wonder, wow, that's pretty complicated, and it is. And the interesting thing from an enterprise point of view is that all of the data that you use to analyze what you're doing is resident outside of the enterprise. It's very atypical of what you normally do in enterprise, especially larger companies, where they have very sophisticated ERP systems from Oracle or SAP, and all of the accounting and financial data is resident inside of the enterprise, so they can use their Power BI tools, Tableau, and various other data visualization tools to understand what the heck's going on, even on a geographically global basis. But in travel, all of the data is outside of the enterprise, and it may be resident multiple times. You book a flight, you use the corporate card, you expense it in your Concur system, and you fundamentally have the same transaction 3 times. And so that's the first problem. The second problem is leakage. It's not a very pleasant term, but that's what it's called. And that's booking outside of the corporate managed program. And these stats came from Concur at an LA GBTA meeting a few weeks ago. They have 65,000 customers that use Concur, and the amount of leakage is pretty interesting if you're managing a program. 65% of hotel bookings were outside of the managed program. In other words, going direct to the vendor. And that means Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, the usual hotel brands and chains. So whether it's air, whether it's rental, whether it's hotel, there's a serious amount of buying being done outside of the programs. And so with all of the data, with all of the money flying around, and with people going in and out of program, how do you understand your duty of care? How do you understand if your policies are being respected, et cetera? That's the current situation that travel finds itself in today. And just to give some context, one of the major things corporations could always depend on is they were getting the best deal because they were big. But that's no longer the case anymore because, for instance, if you look at the list of online travel agencies, the OTAs, Booking.com is doing nearly $150 billion a year in bookings. And Amex GBT, which is the largest in the world on the managed side, even with the acquisition of CWT, will only be doing 45 billion. So now there's an increasing pressure, and this stuff is starting to get interesting, where corporations are saying, "Am I getting the best deal?"
So it's interesting, you know, as a the head of travel at Cvent, I'm sure many of you in the audience, some of those statistics are a little bit frightening. So Matt, what is your take?
Yeah, I'm certainly nodding my head to Jean. Like that's definitely what we're hearing. I'm sure many of you in the audience can identify with what he just described and kind of the current situation and the stats. When we talk to travel teams, it all comes down to, in some way or another, I need to know where my travelers are so I can look out for their safety. And we've heard lots and lots of stories about safety situations. Personally, I've been in situations where I've been concerned. And then also in spending the company's resources wisely, which for a long time was just about dollars. But now it's broadening to include concerns about how much time employees are taking to book, what sustainability resources, the company's making certain commitments on carbon targets, and how much is the travel program and the Scope 3 emissions contributing towards that resource that is important for the company to understand. Yeah, we think a lot of it comes back to data, and a lot of the a few of the drivers that it's driving this current situation, especially when it comes to the kind of the leakage percentages, are things like the suppliers and the tactics they're using to have a stronger relationship with customers. Me personally, I stayed across the street at the Marriott. First thing I saw when I signed on with my laptop on the Wi-Fi was, if you're a honors member, or if you're a loyalty program with Marriott, you get free Wi-Fi. And so that's just one of many, many cues and resources and tools that they use to reinforce that relationship and encouraging buying directly from Marriott or Hilton or Hyatt. But that's also moving into airlines and the strategies that airlines are using to have a stronger relationship. They have the larger share to claim relative to where leakage and the stats are today. So we'll talk about that in a little bit, definitely. But there's also things like Belanger and people combining vacations, and if they're traveling overseas, they want to spend a few days, see the city with their spouse potentially. It's a great opportunity, and so that kind of leads to new questions about what's the company's responsibility for those 2 days that you tack on to your trip. Are they supposed to look out for you from a duty care standpoint? There's an article in the New York Times a few months ago talked exactly about this challenge, this issue, and that what companies are struggling with. And then part of that is also the employees' expectations and expectations and understanding of the travel program. And am I covered for the leisure part if I get injured or if there's a weather event? Will the company look out for me? And then the last thing I'll share also is kind of the current situation is new people entering the workforce, who have different expectations than people that have been in the workforce for a long time. And I think that is, if it's not already, it's going to be changing travel programs to help meet those expectations, because at the end of the day, it could be a decision that this person makes. Am I going to go to work for this company or this company? You know, labor market's pretty tight already. What is the travel policy if I'm going to be on the road 50% of the time? What's the policy on business class or upgrades, or can I book with American because I'm a very loyal American customer? So that's kind of how we look at the situation today.
Well, Matt touched on Belanger, so a shameless promotion. We actually have a session at 3 o'clock that will address Belanger and wellness and travel in the corporate travel program. So we hope to see you back for that. But one of the biggest disruptors in modern corporate travel is NDC, the new distribution capability. You know, many of my fellow travel managers probably hear this as a new and exciting technology evolution, but in reality, it makes our job more complicated, of course. So Matt, what is NDC?
NDC is a new way that airlines are using to merchandise essentially what they have to sell. In the olden days with the Edifact technology, there were a very limited number of like SKUs, if you will, or ways they could bundle their fares in order to be sold wherever someone might buy travel. With NDC, it's virtually unlimited on the number of bundles they could create. So combining, you know, at checkout when you're buying your air tickets, you could combine upgrades with extra bags, with prepaid Wi-Fi. Maybe there are other services, you know, meal upgrades that they might offer in the future. And so those bundles can be dynamically created, and they can also be personalized to you as a loyal whatever airline customer, no matter where you shop. And so that's what the kind of the promise is for NDC. The challenge is, and kind of concern from many players is the readiness of the points of sale, primarily the agencies, in being able to offer and sell NDC fares. We've definitely seen different airlines take different tactics, but I think it's important to really understand it's more than just airlines that are at play here, that are involved. Definitely the airlines, they view it as I get more opportunities to merchandise different travel products to my customers. Agencies, kind of where they stand is many agencies are having challenges. Thankfully, there's been a lot of work over the last year. There's definitely been a lot of pressure over the last year for them to catch up and implement NDC technologies. But that's what the agencies are having to do, is they're having to make very large technology investments to be able to sell this new type of inventory. The travelers themselves, I think, it's really more of a positive for them. I think what we see is the ability for your loyalty to be recognized and be rewarded somewhat, you know, on a better experience with your preferred airlines. But on the other hand, for the corporations, it's typically viewed as kind of a risk, and there's just a lot of concern among corporate travel managers because an obvious kind of reaction, if the fare that my employee is looking for is not available with my agency that hasn't upgraded their technology to support NDC activity and NDC fares, the employee has a better chance of going directly to the airline and their .com site to book. And what that happens when they do that is it's creating a blind spot. This leakage that John talks about, that increases that leakage and makes more and more of a blind spot, which leads to increased risk from duty of care, less visibility to negotiate fares, and less oversight from a policy standpoint. Are my employees buying the right things? It might be, you know, an appropriate price that they're paying for, but the lack of visibility until the employee submits the expense report is a really big challenge.
We just have a question in the chat whether we would share the statistics we showed just a few minutes ago, and we will share that after the presentation. Now, Matt just mentioned you know, different ways for corporate travelers to potentially negate the process. So, Jean, question for you: are corporate fares safe? And what do you think airlines are doing to induce travelers moving towards their NDC content?
It's an interesting discussion because NDC versus EDIFACT is an infrastructure problem. It doesn't have a lot to do with the end user. It's how you deliver a particular valuable good or service. And the EDIFACT is 40 years old. It's like I was telling the guys, I've done 3 startups in software, and the first one was bought by Motorola. And if you can imagine, that was in 2000, and the flip phone was all the rage. No internet access. Can you imagine living without internet access on your phone today? It's impossible. You just can't function in doing business or family, et cetera, et cetera. So in the end, there's a great resistance to change, and there is a reason for that. It's expensive, and it's a pain in the ass. I mean, who wants to change all this stuff, and then you know, all you end up doing is getting criticized because it doesn't work exactly right out of the box. And my last startup was doing data science like we are now, but I was working in supply chain before the pandemic when supply chain was not cool, right? And so I was dealing with 4 of the top 10 retailers in the United States: Walmart, CVS, Lowe's, Best Buy, and a whole bunch of others. I even did the supply chain for the vaccines for Merck, and that was not cool at the time at all, because no one knew what a vaccine was. So this was in 2018, 2019. And if you think EDIFACT to NDC is a problem, you should have seen the retailers moving to e-commerce, kicking and screaming. They did not want to do it. And the reason they didn't want to do it is because it disrupted everything. Everything they did in terms of how they understood the customer, their point of sale, the supply chain. Just to give you a context, if a company like Walmart or Lowe's had to build a distribution center to service an area, yeah, it's about 150 million, give or take. You know, I think Lowe's had 17 of those when we were dealing with them. And you just imagine, do I build a store? Do I build a distribution center? No, we're going to build a store. And so NDC is the same thing. It provides a rich suite of possible rates and fares and bundles. And who doesn't like that? I mean, seriously, who doesn't like more choice, more variety? But there's a downside to all of that. And that is, the major vendors in travel are no different than the major vendors in technology or other industries. They want to control the customer. And that's not a nefarious intent. They just want to be able to deal with the customer one-on-one. And they'd like to have some pricing power. So NDC, direct-to-vendor, Marriott, Bonvoy, all of these various programs, loyalty systems, are all geared for maximum margin for the vendor. And the customer has to decide how do they fend for themselves. And in terms of corporate rates and negotiated rates, well, everybody's doing dynamic pricing now. And we're an AI company, so don't throw rocks at me for saying it, but AI helps figure out dynamic pricing. And of course, that's the vendor side. So what does the customer do? Well, if you're not equipped with similar technology to kind of try and level the playing field, then you're at a disadvantage. The good news about technology disruptions like this is new tools, new techniques, better ways to do things come out of the woodwork to help solve the problem. And that's the innovation cycle we're in. Traxo has got some very cool tools to do that, so do we. And so the goal is to try to level the playing field. Negotiated rates, I'm not sure they're going to be here forever. Just because, how do I negotiate in a dynamic environment? I mean, if you're in the stock market and you're used to millisecond response time, that's one thing. But when you're in a corporate environment, like on the analytics side that we do, you know, when we started 3 years ago focusing on travel, I mean, people were getting, end users, big companies were getting their analytics 6 weeks after the fact. I almost had a heart attack. I was doing supply chain in millisecond response time. And I couldn't figure out why it would take 6 weeks to do all of this when we were doing more complicated things much, much faster. But we had no choice. We had to go that fast to solve the problem. And so the travel buyers in particular, everyone in this room, if you could tell your vendors, hurry up, that would be helpful. Hurry up and give me, the other thing is, give me APIs that are real APIs and not pseudo FTP situations where I get a dump at the end of every day. We want to go within the hour, like that's our goal. We want to get all of the analytics in place within 60 minutes of something happening. And when we started 3 years ago, it was on average about 4 or 5 weeks. We've got it down, I think, to a day, where most of the vendors can give us the information. We'd like to get it live. So what's gonna happen is you're gonna have to force the vendors who you work with to go faster. We can't do it because we're receiving the data that you provide us via the vendor. So overall, negotiated rates, I'm not so sure.
So I actually want to combine my question with one we got on the chat. So Jean, I was going to ask, how can data and technology help with some of these issues? But the question we got in the chat is sustainability just as important now as it was a year ago or how it has been? And how can data, so I'll add, how can data and technology help with that?
Yeah. We do, about 2 years ago, we decided we're going to do a CO2 calculator or bring a CO2 calculator data into our framework so we could provide CO2 emissions for our customers. Business is a little bit different than consumer. Consumer, when you go on Google, you'll see it's 300 pounds or 3 tons of CO2 if you take this flight and that flight. The problem is up to 50% sometimes of flights in business are either canceled or changed. I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I want to get home, I go to the airport, there's only room in business class, I upgrade to business class, which is 4x the CO2 consumption, whatever. All of these changes at the last minute. So we did not only the front in predicting, we also do a post-trip verification. And all of this was really kind of kicking along, but in the last 3 or 4 or 5 months, things have gotten serious because of CSRD in Europe. If any of the buyers or managers here are dealing with global situations in Europe in particular, their sustainability reporting requirements are in place. In the United States, the SEC deferred decision on sustainability reporting until after the presidential election. It was too hot a topic. There's a lot of controversy. As far as sustainability, we've done a lot of work, and my summary on it is pretty simple. Today, there's about 55 billion metric tons of CO2 emitted globally. And whether you believe in climate change or you don't, that's a hell of a lot of CO2, and it's probably a pollution problem anyway. So the reality is that problem is not going to go away. And in travel, 50 to 70% of the CO2 for a trip, a business trip, is from air travel. And so that's going to get a lot of attention in the next few years. So yes, it's becoming an issue, not quite as important as how much does the fare cost today, but it's getting there.
This all sounds ominous, actually.
Is that?
It sounds ominous, some of these things. So is there a solution?
Well, it's complicated. I guess that's the way to say it. Jet fuel is a wonder product. Imagine you're lifting 300,000 or 400,000 pounds, 17 hours in the air, and it lands, and everybody, at least we used to land safely. I'm not so sure about it today, but in any case, jet fuel is a wonder product. It generates about 14 times the power of an equivalent weight of batteries in your car. So it's really tough to replace, especially long distance. So the solution, as IATA proposes it, is basically sustainable aviation fuel. the Biden administration just allowed ethanol to be used in air travel and to replace jet fuel. So that's a major possible source of SAF. But IATA announced this week that this year there's going to be about 0.53 of 1% of SAF available given the total jet fuel usage. In other words, less than half of 1% of SAF will replace jet fuel this year, and it's got to be 5% in 2030, and eventually 70% in 2050, which is going to require between now and 2030 about 125, 130 refineries. And those refineries take about 5 to 7 years to get approved and built. So you do the math, we're in 2024, add 6 and you're at 2030. So it's going to be very, very tight to make the numbers. So yeah, this is going to be a very hot button moving forward, I think.
So Jean mentioned dynamic pricing. We have other travel summit sessions throughout the afternoon, and actually the next one will delve more into dynamic pricing. So if that's a topic, certainly stay around for that. But Matt, give us your point of view on these. And I'd like to pose a question to you. Do you find buyers are pushing back on dynamic pricing?
That's a good one.
Yeah, I think it's just, I think it just kind of adds to more of the confusion. And I think our customers, they haven't voiced those concerns directly to us, or we're not hearing that activity. The partners that they work with, that we share data with, I think those partners are definitely more active in that space, like a TripBam or similar type of a partner there. Kind of on the sustainability front, it's funny, like we see customers, for example, that might buy multiple flights. They have an option A and an option B just in case the meeting goes long. And so that's a scenario that we see, just to add more kind of
more change.
Yeah, more change, more confusion. Sorry, just wanted to mention that.
Yeah, it makes sense.
More change, more confusion, more like a lack of understanding of what's happening that leads to how are you going to react to the new legislation, legislation and reporting requirements coming through Europe. Even from a safety standpoint, with ISO 31030 as a new ISO standard around risk management in travel, how are you as a company are you going to decide to make a commitment to ISO 31030? And how are you going to do that? Who are you going to partners are going to work with? And do you have the resources and the information and the data to be able to live up to those obligations in 31030?
So this has been a very insightful conversation so far. We've exhausted all the questions we have in the chat, so we wanted to make sure we gave people in the audience opportunity to ask live questions. Any questions from the audience on any of the topics we've talked over?
Don't be shy.
Wow. No questions at all. So you've given excellent answers if no one has questions.
If I could, I think there's one thing that is kind of a current for both Jean and I that we see definitely is the importance of data, and that acquiring data, all the data that you can about your travel program, the most complete, the richest data, and John emphasized kind of the timeliness of the data. Late data is virtually useless. There's not a whole lot you can do with data that's very, very late. So for us at Traxo, and definitely for Jean, data is super important. And so as far as like solutions for how to address confusion and confusion that we expect to kind of grow as NDC expands and suppliers are forging stronger relationships with consumers, and new types of travel is occurring with, we see a lot of new uses of group meetings and kind of smaller teams that are distributed most of the time, but they meet together on a quarterly basis. 50 people get together in one central location. So at the end of the day, it's do you have the data, the comprehensive data about all of your travel activity, and is it organized in a way where it can be analyzed, or a system can provide intelligence based on what does this data mean to me? And then the last thing is, can this data be useful to my service providers in duty of care, because in duty of care and policy and spend management, because that's kind of, for the travel team, kind of their highest calling really. It's around looking out for the safety of travelers and are they spending the company's resources wisely.
I think it's interesting, we keep mentioning travel, and we are speaking both of travel and meetings, but do you think there are differences in how we analyze the data between the normal corporate travel program and an event such as this, or customers' events?
Yeah, I think depending on the questions you're trying to answer, it's important to understand the intent. And probably more so from the standpoint of there's questions that if it's a meeting, maybe you don't need to ask or don't need to delve into and waste your time, because we know travel teams are always strapped for time. There's so many other questions to take care of and address. So I think that's one area where I would say it's important to understand which data, what is the purpose of the travel activity in different types of data, so you can ask the right questions from that data set.
One of the things that we're doing that's interesting is if you consolidate all of the travel data, and I got so aggravated in my last company, which was data science, that I refused to have anyone come in my office who would mention the word data, because I knew they were going to start complaining, and it just drove me up the wall. So when we started Cerebri in 2016, we said we're going to fix the data problem, and we're going to build a data engineering platform that can reconcile QA and do all that stuff. But the interesting thing about travel data is that one of the things that we noticed right away is we can find hidden meetings. We have all the data down to the transaction, the Uber, the whatever you're doing, the restaurant, et cetera. Well, if all of a sudden 7 people are in Topeka, Kansas, and we don't have an office or a customer there, then there must be a meeting going on. And so hidden meetings is now interesting for our customers. They're saying, we want the meetings to be in organized meetings in our meetings group because of cost and because of all the various corporate policies that we want to, we have put in place. So there's various things you can do with data, and unfortunately, as you heard today, AI was mentioned about every 7 minutes in every presentation. And it's a reality and the reason AI works is because it has capabilities that regular math models and Excel can't do. And the best example I can give you is we were asked by the Bank of Canada in 2018 to help them model the Canadian GDP numbers that they announce every 2 weeks. And they have just under 100 econometrics and economic brain surgeons in terms of all this stuff. And in about 15 months, we were able to beat the traditional models with our AI model because we used 10 times the number of variables. So in one model we did for Verizon, we had almost 2,000 variables. So if you think of an employee, their address is one variable, their phone number is another. We had 2,000 of those things in a model, and the models can crunch the numbers. And they can crunch for all day, all night. If they have to, it just goes. So when you have all of this data, you can do very powerful things with it if you're organized properly. So the travel industry's got a bit of a headache coming, if it hasn't already happened, which is there's no more excuses for bad data. It's too valuable. And so if your vendors are not providing you with the data you need, and you need an outside vendor like us, heaven forbid, that can consolidate all of the data that you need in order to make better decisions. Because I don't think dynamic pricing is going away. In fact, I think it's only going to become more common and more sophisticated. The vendors want maximum margins for their products, and you want to pay the least amount of money possible.
Well, Jean, if I could interrupt right there, it's interesting to tie into one of the questions we have from the audience. If anyone knows about 2,000 variables, it'll be, meeting planners. Many of the people in the audience, there's millions of variables. Yep. Meetings such as this are the ones our customers hold. So what do you think the best way for the meeting planners is to gather the data and analyze the data and achieve savings, hopefully, from it, or efficiencies?
Well, one of the reasons why AI modeling projects don't work so well and they give variable or iffy results is because the first thing you've got to do is you've got to target exactly what you're trying to figure out. So if you're trying to minimize costs, maximize revenue, you're trying to figure out what the customer wants to buy next, whatever the problem is, you have to target it. One of the issues you have in AI and any area, meetings, travel, the people who know the data, you don't do the models. The data scientists do the models. I spend a lot of my time telling the data scientists to get back on track with the problem we're trying to solve. Because the data scientists love to go down pathways that have absolutely nothing to do with what we're trying to solve. And the reason isn't because they're just not focused or they don't care about business. They just look at these problems they're in a different time zone. Just look at it that way. They look at it this way and you want to go that way because that problem you're trying to solve is important. But this other thing is interesting too. So you have to be very focused on what you're trying to do, and you have to be constantly vigilant in making sure that your data scientists, the PhDs, the rocket scientists are focused on what you want, not what they're interested in.
So Matt, the audience wants to know where business travel will be in 5 to 10 years.
So that's a big question. I will share, there is a change that we see happening in how travel programs are run. A lot of us here, me included, we have a different relationship with our cable service company than we did just a few years ago because of our other subscriptions to Netflix and Disney and all the other apps. And one might call that an unbundling of services. That you get your sports through the ESPN app, you get your movies through the HBO app instead of the consolidated package from your cable company. We see something happening in travel management around a similar theme of unbundling, where travel managers are looking at all the services out there that they could be using and really encouraging them, kind of as Jean said, to build more proper APIs so they are interoperable and can talk to each other. And thankfully that is happening, and what that enables them to do is be less reliant on a single place to do everything or attempt to do everything for them. So we even see some of our customers make diagrams, even just back of the envelope diagrams of, gosh, I could use this service provider for this need, and this service provider for this other need, and this other one for this other need. And I know, I have confidence that that's going to work. I can control that. Even kind of like I went around the innovation pavilion yesterday and seeing all the marketplace partners. That's the same theme, that they have seen a specific need and they're targeting in on making the best experience possible for a specific need. And Cvent is making it very easy to interact with that partner that's an expert in that specific area. So we see that growing. And we actually see that as one way that relative to the chaos that is kind of happening, like for example with NDC, and is American going to do this or is American going to do that, and what's happening with United and the Delta. A lot of confusion, a lot of questions, but our customers and what we see the market moving is building their own solutions around how they want to run their travel program. And a lot of it comes back to a a hub of their data that they control, and that they determine it should go to this partner for this service today, and maybe I'll try out this other competitor tomorrow. And it's all the investments that these partners and service providers are making in technology and APIs to encourage interoperability that's making this possible. So that's kind of where we see growth and change happening with corporate travel management. And I think that will also affect meetings management and kind of having more flexibility with service providers that you want to work with in the future.
You've given us a roadmap of where you think we'll be in 5 to 10 years, but what do you think the next big thing will be?
I think it's been really interesting to see, just to kind of say AI one more time, it's been very interesting to see that there are a lot of people that are finding very good value out of what they're getting from some of these AI services. That it's saving, at the end of the day, it's kind of saving time for them. I use it every other day when I have a recording of a conversation, like a research conversation, and I want to quickly summarize what did we talk about. The service I use can just, with a single click, summarize the conversation, and I have probably 60% of what I need to move forward, and that's probably good enough. And it just saved me an hour of my time going through and trying to pick out what are the positive and negative sentiment reactions and things like that. So I'm excited to see where we're going to go and kind of the proliferation of it. Nice thing is on the technology side, I always think about the technology. On the technology side, the vendors are making big investments to make it easier to develop products that use components of AI. I think that the costs are going down to be able to come up to do these types of analysis. But maybe one kind of word of caution, me wearing my InfoSec hat, is just being aware of when you share data with some of these platforms, that you know how it's being used, and if your organization has certain concerns or requirements that you have, if you have a contract with this vendor, that you're able to voice those through the MSA or the SOW, detailing your relationship with that vendor. Yeah, that's how I'd answer that question.
John, any quick thoughts?
In terms of the future, I hope rates
What the
come
next
down.
big thing is?
I hope rates come down because travel's expensive. So
I think we all agree with that.
Yeah.
what's that?
I think we all can agree on that.
Yeah. Well, when you run a small business, even if you're the CEO, you don't get the gold, platinum stars around its service that major company CEOs get. So in any case, no, the big AI is a buzz because it works. I've been doing this for 20 years. And it just works. It's very powerful technology. It has to be applied properly. There's no reason why you shouldn't be hearing it because of the productivity gains. The only the seminal date that sort of when things changed was about 2018, when the researchers at Google's DeepMind subsidiary in the UK in Cambridge, that's when the computer models started to be able to infer things, and that's what you see from the large language models from Google and OpenAI, Meta's Llama, et cetera. So the ability to infer is different than how computers traditionally do logic, which is basically smash mouth. If in image recognition, if you want a computer to recognize a cat, you used to show it 1 million pictures of a cat, and the computer would see another picture of a cat and go, well, that's a cat. Whereas you would see a cat, and 5 years later, you're able to process the information and say, that's a cat. And you've only seen one 5 years ago, which is incredible because you have a leap of logic. And that's what's happened with the large language models. There's good news and bad news. The good news is it works, and it can help you 60%, 70% of the time. The problem is it may make a mistake. And so as is wont to be in educated circles, we have to have a name for it. So we go back to the 60s, and now models hallucinate. So, so hallucinations are cool if you're asking for a one-page summary of Othello by Shakespeare, but if you're trying to make a business decision in enterprise in a company that you work for, where you're actually spending money, hallucinations are not a cool thing. So anybody mentions Gen AI to you internally in your companies, just be careful that they've thought the thing through. There's guardrails, and you're not going to be using data that's going to cause trouble down the road.
Yeah, exactly. Well, everyone, we certainly appreciate you attending our session today. We, all of us in travel and technology can talk about either one for hours and hours. So we do have other sessions that are coming up after this. In the app, if you would take the survey, we'd appreciate your feedback. It helps us analyze what people are looking for information-wise, what you like not so much, so that we can do our programming for the future. So we appreciate that. And then, as I mentioned, we have other sessions here throughout the afternoon. Those are up. And at the end of the day, 4 o'clock, we have attendee meetup. You all are welcome to attend that. That's for corporate travel buyers and suppliers. But thank you very much. We appreciate your time.
Thank you.